Grade 7s. I miss you, and I even miss all your chatting and telling me all your stories and your compliments on how I'm dressed. I always been putting on an outfit the other day, and I thought, oh, the grade 7s would love this outfit. So I miss you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you again and hear all your stories and voices and just hear what's been going on in your life. So I hope you guys have been enjoying all the geography videos that I've been posting. I enjoyed watching some of them. They were quite funny and cute and very informative. So today I'm going to do my own video for you, and this is about the history, and this is about slavery in West Africa. So please turn with me to page 130 in your textbook. Okay, so I am on page 130 of your textbook, and we're going to talk about West Africa before the European slave trade. So this is before slaves were taken from West Africa to different countries, and this was the actual slave trade inside West Africa. So we had West African farmers. So let's have a look quickly at our keywords, and that might help you to understand the text better. We have voluntarily, of your own free will. A slave is a person who is owned by someone else. So most West Africans lived in settled farming societies. Farmers grew food to feed themselves and their families. If there was food left over, they would trade it for goods that they needed. So this builds on what you guys learned from grade 5 about the farming communities. So next we have farming and herding livestock required a lot of people to do the work. Even if a community was settled on good land with good water supplies, they still need people to farm the land. So if you're on a farm, you have lots of people that work for you, and it takes a lot of physical labor, all the little things that need to be done to grow the food. And so farmers needed extra workers, and they would sometimes exchange some of their grain for a child from a poor family, which is so sad that people would exchange their children for food. I think that's really sad. So the child would then work for the family who bought him or her, and they often would often people who were very poor voluntarily became slaves. So if they were so poor that they couldn't look after themselves, they just became a slave, because then they would have food and a house. So when people think of slavery today, they usually think of slavery from long ago in the United States, where black slaves from West Africa were owned by white masters. So we will get to that, and there's the tobacco farms, and there's many movies about that. But now we're talking specifically about trading slaves for food and those kinds of things in West Africa. This is before it went global, before it went out of West Africa. So activity 1 says look at source A and draw 3 conclusions about West African slavery. So if you draw conclusions, you're going to make decisions about it. I have put in your prep document a good explanation of conclusions and how to draw it. So question 2 says explain why West African farmers needed slaves. This information above here will tell you. And number 3 says name one way in which farmers could get slaves. So this tells you more than one way here. Next, I'm going to move on page 131 and the nature of slavery in West Africa before European. So the nature of slavery means what was it like to be a slave, and what was slavery like, and this is before Europeans came to take slaves to different countries. So there have been many different kinds of slavery throughout history, and slavery existed in West Africa long before the European transatlantic slave trade began. When the kind of slavery in West Africa, but this kind of slavery was different to the kind of slavery that developed as a result of the European transatlantic slave trade. So European transatlantic means we cross the Atlantic Ocean. They would come and fetch slaves here and take them. So in West Africa, slavery was only practiced on a small scale, and these slaves were usually people who were captured in battle, were criminals, had been chased away by other local societies, were bought to perform unskilled work or domestic labor, might become part of the families of slave owners, and might later become soldiers. So that's what it was like. The Trans-Sahara slave trade is the indigenous West African slavery changed at the beginning of the 7th century. Thousands of black slaves were sent to North Africa, parts of the Middle East and Southern Europe. Later, African kings like Mansa Musa raided their weaker neighbors and sold their captives as slaves. They also kept slaves of their own. These men were powerful rulers with large armies, and slaves were often used as soldiers. Slaves worked in the gold mines and farmed the land. They were usually exchanged for horses. 15 or 20 slaves were exchanged for one Arabian horse. So you can't believe that a horse was of so much more value to them than what people were, than what these slaves were. So under source A, it says Arab Muslims raided and traded for black African slaves in West Africa. This is a drawing of an Arab slave trading caravan that is transporting black African slaves across the Sahara Desert. So if you remember, we spoke about Mansa Musa in term 1. And so this is just telling you his influence on the slave trade. Again, activity 1, it says, how did West African slavery contrast the trans-Saharan slave trade? How was it different? So how was this slavery different to this slavery when we say contrast? And why do you think one horse could be exchanged for 15 or 20 slaves? And that's just your opinion. Okay, guys, I can't wait till the day when we can see each other again. Have a great day.